Hi, everybody. Welcome to Santa Barbara Talks with Josh Molina and Newsmakers with JR. We are doing a series of interviews with candidates and those running for election this March 5th, where I don't know, less than 60 days now from the big day. And it's such a pleasure, such an honor to be here with 3rd District Santa Barbara County Supervisor Joan Hartmann. And we're going to have a conversation here, a few questions with my colleague Jerry. Jerry, how are you doing today?
I'm doing well. How are you doing, Supervisor?
It's a cool, crisp, beautiful day here in Santa Ynez.
Yeah, it looks nice.
Great. So I know we have a lot to talk to, so let's dive right in. Supervisor Hartmann, I want to ask you about housing, and obviously we know there's been so much talked about with the housing element and the rezoning of properties. And when the housing element originally came out, there was a lot of pushback, concern about rezoning agricultural land for housing, and there was sort of a few different attempts, and the county started looking at its own property, and some things got added. But let's just start right there when it comes to rezoning of agriculture land for housing. And specifically, I want to ask you about the Glen Annie Golf Club, which has been a source of contention among a lot of people who live in the county, but really live in Goleta. So talk to me, what is your approach going into this housing conversation with the rezones?
Yeah, I'd like to put it in a little bit of perspective, if I may. This is our sixth RENA process, 8-year cycle. And this time we have 6 times more housing units that were required to build countywide than in the past. 2/3 of those are delegated for South County. And that's because they have a formula that if you're cost burdened or you have very low housing accessibility, that they add more housing. So technically in unincorporated county, 4,142 units, plus 15% cushion. So that's a lot of units. And so the county was scrambling. Supervisor Capps and I scrambled some more to try to create a broader universe of projects. And what we learned this time is that the state, and really with direction from the legislature, they're serious about housing. And so in the past, it's been something you could rezone as an exercise and really didn't have much follow-up. This time, any property that we propose to rezone, we have had to demonstrate to the state that actually could be built within the next 8 years and that the owner is interested in building. So typically we want to do infill, but the problem with infill is that often in commercial areas, there are long-term leases on those properties. So 40, 50-year leases. And so you can't really guarantee, we couldn't convince HCD that those properties would really be built out in the next 8 years. So we're planning already now in a number of different ways to get ready for the 7th, the next RENA cycle. But housing is the #1 code red issue in our county. And I can't go anywhere but healthcare, county workers, nonprofits, families, where housing isn't the issue. And here's why. In 1983, the housing prices were 4 times one's annual income. By 2021, it's 22 times people's annual income. In South County, the average price is $2 million. So that means $8,000 a month that you have to pay without insurance and tax. So that's $100,000, that you need just for housing. So it's really gotten out of reach for people. So we have to do something because we've lost in the past in Santa Barbara County our Black population, much of our Asian population, and we're at risk now of losing a lot of our Latino population as well as our workforce. And so we really need to engage, but we don't want to build just housing. We want to build strong neighborhoods. We want to build really desirable communities. And so that takes really good planning. So one thing that we did last Tuesday at the board meeting was we set out criteria that we would like developers to come in and present their projects and describe how their projects will conform to these criteria. The law only requires that rezoning be for the general community welfare. But what does that mean? So we as a board, and this was really my initiative, had a discussion about what this means. Now, one thing we've learned from the balancing tool, which I gather you don't like, Josh, but I'm here to tell you that I think it makes this process more transparent. And what we've learned is that builders remedy projects have come in. And so what we need going forward is workforce housing. And the balancing tool tells us that that's from 80% to 120% of the average median income, area median income. So we need to focus our county sites on that workforce, that missing middle housing, and we need to request that developers come in with a plan. And that's trickier because we don't get the subsidies from a variety of sources. So I haven't made up my mind about the, which parcels to rezone, and I'm waiting. But for me, a mix of housing types, so it's not all expensive housing. We don't need more expensive housing in South County, Santa Barbara. And if there can be amenities like parks and trails, especially as we're denser, how people need green space, people need to get out, and childcare. So we'll be looking for those kinds of amenities, and again, building strong communities when the developers come in.
Supervisor, let me just ask you something, because it seems to me, and Josh has written a lot about the kind of messy process that led up to the housing element, but what was missing in it was the neighbors. You went to the developers, oh, you want to do this and everything. What about the people who live next door? I mean, aren't you in for sort of a series of lot by lot trench warfare about these rezonings? I mean, the neighbors really haven't been heard from in this whole process.
There have been various public forums that our planning and development department has held. I agree that indeed I would have liked a more robust public process. We were put in a bit of a bind. We didn't realize when we started all of this how demanding HCD was. We were kind of anticipating the way it's been done in the past. So there was a lot more back and forth to actually prove to them, provide evidence that these rezone candidates could actually feasibly be rezoned over the next 8 years. And that kind of took everybody by surprise, how onerous that process was. So the board was in a position, what do we do? Do we draw this process out, which opens us up to more builders remedy projects where we don't have any control, the board or the neighbors, and we face potential the state will withhold grant opportunities for active transportation, and we don't know the full extent of what that would be. That hasn't been imposed. So we did have to short circuit the public process. We did everything that's legal and more, but in Santa Barbara, people generally expect more, and we didn't do as much as we would have liked to. I am regarding Glen Annie, going to be convening a meeting and talking to people out there. I've been walking door to door and talking to people about it. I've received many emails and have responded, but I don't know exactly what the developer is proposing, and I'm eager to hear that, eager for the community to hear that. Whether we actually have to rezone Glen Annie, I really don't know.
Yeah, and I just want to follow up one thing with the tool. It isn't as though I don't like the tool, but it feels as though, I mean, this is what happened. The county has approved the sites, And now you're asking the community to like do the puzzle piece of where could we do the units? And it just feels as though the sites are where the most important part of this process. And now people feel like they have a little bit of independence to say, oh, if we put them here, this is this many, if we take them away. But the real policy decision, is already made. And the fact that these sites have been identified. And the Glen Annie thing, Supervisor Hartman, the people of Goleta, I think everyone I talk to agrees with everything you said. We need more workforce housing. That's a fact. And anyone who says we don't is wrong. We do. But the fact that that spot, that space, the infrastructure, one road, people live in Goleta near a high school, I think there's there are gonna be a lot of eyes on you when it comes to that.
I agree, but let me just say that when it comes to choosing parcels, you want to choose parcels that are surrounding urban areas. You don't want leapfrog development. That's poor planning. And so that kind of limits the sites, the universe of sites that you would be surveying. And then once you start to talk to the landowners, I mean, again, Supervisor Capps and I, we were calling, knocking on doors, doing everything we could. We did, in fact, get the university to commit to 750 units that count for faculty and staff. So that brought our number down. So we were out there, in addition to planning and development staff, trying to identify how do we broaden the universe. But it's already limited to some extent because you want it adjacent to urban areas. You want to avoid leapfrog development. Then you say, well, who's willing to be considered? And that further limits it. So that's kind of the bind.
Yeah, and that's exact. Glen Annie is not near like a good area for transit bus lines. It's up there. But anyway, Jerry, you want to move on? Next question.
Yeah, we could spend the whole time talking about housing, obviously, but I do want to ask you a little bit about oil. We had this controversy about ExxonMobil wanting to get the pipeline going again, and that ended up as a 2-2 vote because you recused yourself, and your opponent, or one of your opponents, is alleging that you made that all up about the pipeline running by your property, and I know you've got some documents on that. I just wanted to give you a chance to respond because he did raise that question.
Yes, I thank you so much for allowing me to address that. Um, and I sent you a map. It's on the Hanada Springs website, homeowner association, if others want to look, where the pipeline comes. It actually abuts the northeast corner of my property. And so there are rules about conflict of interest. If you are affected in a different way than other members of the community, then you have to recuse if that project is within 500 feet of your house. Well, it's actually either adjacent, abutting, or even cutting across my property. So if so we've got the FPPC rules. I also got a county council opinion and was advised that I have a conflict of interest. If I voted on that project, then that vote could be challenged and we'd have to undo the action. Moreover, I could suffer personal sanctions and penalties as a result. So conflict of interest is a very important concept for public servants. We can't come to office and use it to serve our own personal needs and interests. And anybody who wants to be a public servant must understand that principle.
All right. I'm glad we got a chance for you to put that on the record. But let me ask you more broadly, and this is a little bit of a hypothetical, but assuming the pipeline wasn't by your property, I'm going to take a wild guess and say you probably would have voted against it, only to say that there has been a majority, a 3-2 majority that's, generally quote unquote anti-oil. Mr. Trice has indicated that he would like to reopen that. And that seems to me to be rather a large issue in this race, in the third district race, about how the board goes on oil issues in general. Is that a correct reading? And could you talk about that a little bit?
Sure. Well, I think there have been several. I have not gotten involved in the pipeline issues. I can't be involved. I can't even be in the room. There have been several votes on the pipeline, and I think there was a majority in favor, but sorry, I don't even remember what the issue was because I wasn't involved. Uh, the issue of energy and how we get our energy in Santa Barbara County is always front and center. And certainly fossil fuels, oil has been a big part of our history. And a big question is, how big a part of our future is it going to be? And in my view, our job as public servants is to look around the corner. It's to anticipate what harm could come from our community. I often compare this to horses. There's often some that are grazing, but there's one who will be looking on the horizon for danger. When my first year on the County Board of Supervisors, we experienced a series of disasters. We had the Whittier fire, where 80 children mostly were at risk. We had a major bluff collapse in Isla Vista. We had the Thomas fire and debris flow. We also had El Cap Resort, another preliminary debris flow. So each and every one of those were exacerbated by climate change. It turns out that Santa Barbara and Ventura County, climate change isn't happening equally all over the globe. It's happening disproportionate faster here. And 2023 was the hottest year on record. So we need to transition. We need to wean ourselves away from fossil fuels. I think there is scientific consensus on this. I think there is a large consensus in our community. So the question is, what can we do to wean ourselves? Where do we go next? And I'm very proud that we got Community Choice Energy. We're now with the Central Coast Community Energy. They've reinvested $2 billion into renewable resource development, and we're set by 2030 to be all electric in the power that's delivered to us, and that's 15 years ahead of the state goals. When they wanted to expand the Elwood Peaker plant, a PUC decision said no, but even before that, we were working with Southern California Edison to say, can we use batteries instead? And I just had the opportunity to flip the switch at GridStore, one of the several battery storage facilities that we have. Strauss Wind, that's in my district. That's just come up and running. Offshore Vandenberg will be the first pilot offshore wind project, and the leases have been let in federal waters. There is a lot of discussion in terms of our comprehensive economic development strategy about the Central Coast becoming a renewable energy mecca. In terms of Goleta and the South Coast, millions of dollars are coming to create a virtual power plant. Rooftop, parking lot, solar, battery storage, and all of this will be connected through AI and managed as a single power plant, all this distributed resources. So that's going to be a really ambitious and exciting project for the future. And that's going to be a lot of good jobs, and I'm working on that piece of it in other contexts.
All right. Well, I gotta say, when you talk about AI delivering my electricity, it makes me glad I'm old again. Let me ask you about cannabis, everybody's favorite issue, which has been very divisive. I mean, it seems to me that the original ordinance really screwed the pooch and was very divisive by trying to implant this industry into the county all at once. I know there's been a lot of controversy in your district among the wine growers, particularly up there. And you seemed in your earlier years to go along with the gang there on it, but more recently, I think it seems like you've moderated both on the on the tax issue, as well as the carbon scrubbers. Can you explain exactly where you are on cannabis right now and how effective do you think the ordinance is?
Yeah, let me go back. I supported cannabis. I supported it because under the state rules, it was a way that it was initially supposed to be for small cannabis operations. And I saw it as a way that our existing ranchers and farmers could have a high value product to supplement their income. We didn't anticipate that the state would get rid of those requirements as our ordinance was coming on and this whole issue of stacking. So I agree that a lot of things were changing and the ordinance wasn't ideal. There were 3 votes on the board without my vote for cannabis. One of the supervisors was very strongly supportive of agriculture, and although he was somewhat skeptical of cannabis, when it came to the vote, he simply saw rules about cannabis as the camel's nose under the tent for other kind of agriculture. So in a lot of this, you get what you can. And that's what I did. But I have led the effort initially to put caps on cannabis to stop the Wild West. I also led the charge on bans in what are called existing rural developed neighborhoods. Now we have conditional use permits, higher level permits that give the board greater discretion when cannabis projects come to us, and we can say that it doesn't fit within the context of the neighborhood. And the board very recently, we've got 3 people who said we're willing to reconsider the odor regulations. It's taken a long time to get to that point. And so I I I live in the midst of outdoor cannabis grows in the Santa Ynez Valley, and I experience, we only have 2 harvests a year, typically June and October, unlike Carpinteria, where they're growing all year long in the greenhouses. But I'm highly sensitive. Not everybody is, but I am. So I appreciate and have been working very hard to get more odor controls around cannabis operations.
Well, let me ask you specifically, do you think that carbon scrubbers should be required for the growers?
I think it gets very difficult for an agency to tell private sector, this is the technology you could use, because then you're stuck with that technology as technology improves. My objective would just say, and we have the technology now to detect at the property line, no odor. You get complaints and you have odor beyond the property line, then you've got to fix it. And however you fix it, that's your issue. So I don't believe in telling people how they have to do it. I think it's important to set the goal that they should that they should achieve. And so that would be my strategy. Our current regulations uh, are are don't make sense to me. It's you can't smell cannabis at the closest residentially zoned area. So people who have residences in agriculturally zoned areas can't really register a legitimate complaint.
Yeah, and let me ask you just real quick, because we do need to move on, but obviously the revenue piece of this has been a huge disappointment, in large part because of the glut throughout the state. And we now have, as I understand it, some people that are kind of giving up here and but why is the county then putting those permits back out? Why not just shut it down? And reduce the number of permits instead of continuing to do what we're doing.
I I think we need a board majority to do that. I think Supervisor Capps and I have continually asked that question at the quarterly cannabis tax reports. At what point does the balance between all that we're investing in it must be recalibrated because we're not really generating that much revenue for all the effort. And again, we keep asking that question. You know, we've been incremental in ratcheting back. You know, looking at the odor in a new way, that's a big step. Perhaps we can start next to think about ratcheting back.
All right, thank you.
Supervisor Hartman, I wanted to ask you sort of a politics question, get away from, you know, some of the specific issues, and we'll come back to one afterward. But I want to ask you about the redistricting of the third district and the loss of Isla Vista. Many, you know, substantial amount of voters have never had the opportunity to vote for you before, and so they're seeing your name on a ballot for the first time. And so factoring out, you know, the Isla Vista, the, you know, progressive young students who typically would agree with the Democratic platform, they're not going to be there to vote this time. And so we've seen now Lompoc Mayor Janelle Osborne enter the race. And so I want to ask you about, you know, sort of the Janelle factor and what that means to you. We had her on the show and she talked about how, you know, she doesn't need permission to run. And I know that there was this moment at the SBCAG meeting where you two had a conversation that she talked about on the show about you would have liked a heads up, you know, a call, something. Can you talk about Janelle entering the race and what that means for you, just sort of as somebody who has supported her in the past? And does this concern you, knowing that you don't have that Isla Vista base anymore?
Well, so I'll address that first. I am really privileged to be able to represent Lompoc. And I just came back from a meeting with Janelle and the leadership. They have a program for leaders in Lompoc for people who are eager to learn more about the city. And we were both speakers there. So um, I think Lompoc is on the cusp of a renaissance. And I am excited about bringing every resource that I can to connect to Lompoc to help it along. And it's a tremendously exciting opportunity to make a difference. I think Lompoc often feels like the orphan, the stepchild, and I think it is the most diverse community in our county. It has fabulous weather. It's got really nice architecture. It's small town. It's people who care. The base has a tremendous influence. So I'm excited and have been very, very active and focused on activities in Lompoc. As far as other people in the race, I have a fervent, almost religious belief in democracy, and that, you know, people having conversations like this, we learn, we grow. People working together in groups, we learn and grow. In elections with good contests, we all sharpen each other, and people deserve a choice. And I think now with the candidates, they have a choice, and so I think it's all to the good.
Okay, so when I talked to Janelle, right, she said that you told her a heads up, a call would have been nice, and that you sort of felt a little bit like, hey, I helped you in the past, run. So, I mean, I get your answer and it's the right answer, right? Everyone can run, but that's not like what I heard privately happen between you two. Can you kind of articulate how you felt when you heard Janelle's running for supervisor?
Well,
You were seeing.
there were there were rumblings that she was considering running for many months. Um,
You really helped her, though. You really helped her. I mean, I don't know whether you had anything to do with it or not, but the independent endorsed. They don't usually endorse in the Lompoc mayor's race. So, you know, you were in large. I don't want to say responsible for her victory, but you certainly
no.
contributed to it.
Yes, and I was very happy to contribute, and I think I'm very glad that she won that race. And you know, we all, yes, given our relationship, it would have been a courtesy. It would have been nice just to say, yeah, I'm running. I think I can do this, or she doesn't have to explain it, but just, I wanted to let you know, I filed my papers and I'm running and I'm in the race and we're going to, we work together closely and we're going to continue. It was just, I, I but I understand when people are engaged in competition, it can seem like conflict, and we tend to get in our corners, and the communication stops. And so you have to work even harder to say, does that make sense?
Yeah.
So we were just at a meeting and we were cordial and we listened to each other, and that's how we're going to continue.
Okay. And just last thing, how concerned are you about losing Isla Vista as part of the third district?
Um, I I was an academic. That's my first career. And so I really loved being part of UCSB and being with students. Uh, I must say that given it's the largest concentration of unincorporated area in the county, it was a lot of work. And a lot of work. And then you add that to the other unincorporated areas, Guadalupe, Los Alamos, Vandenberg Village. Uh, it, it- uh, so the district as it is now is this job is a lot of work, but it's a little more manageable. And again, when Guadalupe was in my district, I focused on it like a laser. I think we made some real difference there, and that's what I hope to do in Lompoc.
Supervisor, let me ask you about another issue that's been much in the news, and that is this ambulance contract. That you all went through a rather tortuous process to end up giving it to County Fire, and then AMR, who's had the contract forever, the private company, went to court to say the process was flawed, to say the least, and the judge agreed with him with a rather blistering opinion. What was that all about? I mean, I haven't gone and looked at see if you got contributions from county firefighters, but I'll take a wild guess you may have. But why did you kind of? I mean, it looks like you just did this on purpose as a favor to the county fire department,
Yeah,
and
thank you,
twisted the
Jerry.
process
Yeah,
around.
thank you very much for the question. I have to tread on eggshells here because when matters are in litigation, our county counsel advises us not to talk about them.
Oh,
But
you
I
don't have to listen to
but
what lawyers say. Believe me.
well, if I say things, if I go too far, I could be a witness, called as a witness and deposed. So, but what I can do is say what I've already said in public, and that is this: uh, the county had a 50-year exclusive agreement with the current provider. And when this came to the board, we said, we really want to change this up a little bit. So we have two choices. Do we go with an exclusive agreement or do we go with a non-exclusive? State law and process kind of put us into those two boxes and processes by which we have to operate if we choose one box or the other. So our LEMSA, our local emergency management system, strongly encouraged us to go through the process with an exclusive, and the board agreed. So the RFP is very constrained. And so we couldn't consider certain things in that RFP. We were precluded from considering costs. We were precluded from considering things like transparency about costs or deployment strategy. And we wanted certain kinds of innovations. When ambulance drivers are sitting there between calls, we want to create a community paramedicine program where ambulance drivers are out. If somebody's just come home from the hospital and they need to check to make sure they aren't going to fall, that they can provide these kinds of services so that it's a more efficient, effective system. When we got the result of the RFP, it was very disappointing. But again, it couldn't consider the factors that we thought were really important. So at that point, we said, let's go for a non-exclusive agreement. And we designed a process that we hoped would pass muster. It has not. So my sense is that we're going to try to figure out how to develop a non-exclusive system that will pass muster. So I believe that, let me just tell you about a personal experience. Last Christmas, my husband woke up very early in the morning, confused and not able to walk. We went to the Santa Ynez Valley Cottage Hospital, and they figured out that he had a sepsis. We waited there 9 hours, and his blood, and there were no ambulances available. They were understaffed that day. And so what would have been an interfacility transport and fairly routine, he started crashing, and they had to get a special nurse and could manage the blood pressure medicine and make it into a critical care ride because there weren't enough ambulances there. So I went and asked the fire chief and people, how don't we know how many ambulances are available anymore morning? And can't there be something where people fill in and make sure that we're at optimum levels? The current provider views this as proprietary, and we simply don't and can't know. I believe the public and the emergency responders and managers really, to deploy resources most effectively for our public, are entitled to that information. So that's about all I feel comfortable saying, because that's what I've said publicly in the board meeting before.
Were you surprised that Mr. Bonta, this California Attorney General, decided to weigh in on this and say that this was not not a good process, to say the least?
I would say that private ambulance companies have very strong representation in Sacramento, but that throughout our state, we see changes occurring. And San Diego would be one example. So the law and how to interpret the law is a little bit gray, and we got caught up in some of that. But now the state is asserting its authority. It may be, though, that the legislature is ready to make another clarification. They did that with the county of Sonoma in the past.
Hey, there's your headline, Josh. Hartmann says state AG on take from ambulances.
That's more of a newsletter headline for you, Jared. I think. I have to be always in the middle, So Supervisor Hartmann, forgive me, this next question is going to be a little rambly, but I'm doing the best that I can. We had Frank Troyce on the show. He's running for 3rd District Supervisor. And we had a conversation with him. I'm sure you've watched or listened to that episode.
Only part of it. I'm sorry. It's been a busy week.
Well, and it was kind of long. Yeah. You'll catch season 2.
There's a lot of stuff that he says, and we're not going to ask you about all of them, but some of them. And one of the things that he says is that he has this sort of calculus that the election can be over on March 5th if you and the party chair, Darcel Elliott, endorses his revenues platform. He'll step out. And he goes a little bit further and says, he's been in talks with your campaign to do this, and Janelle Osborne's campaign. So what do you make of this idea that he'll step out of the race if you endorse his revenues platform, and then March 5th it can be all yours or Janelle's or whomever's? What do you, are you in talks with him to get him to step out of the race? What is he talking about?
Your guess is as good as mine.
Okay,
So
so
that's
there's
a
no
big
conversations.
no. That's a big no.
There's no conversations between Dave King and your staff at all about this issue.
Absolutely, emphatically not. I have met Mr. Troy or Troyce, I'm not sure which way to pronounce it, twice. And he came to my office and was proposing a major project that he wanted help with. Uh, courted to run, but he was emphatically not running. And that's the last I have had any personal contact, or anybody in my campaign has had personal contact with him.
Okay. You know, the other thing that he has said and has brought up is this woman, Karen Jones. And he's sort of having this, I mean, it is kind of an odd, and I told him that it's like this weird connection because she endorsed you 4 years ago, um, when you were running against Bruce Porter. And I guess later, as you know, many publications have reported, she was at the insurrection January 6th, and I believe she was arrested, and she's facing some kind of charges over this. And now he's sort of saying, "Look, who backs Joan Hartmann?" Can you talk about that? I mean, he sent me a video of her talking about why she endorses you. Is there any connection at all between Joan Hartmann and Karen Jones?
Karen Jones ran against me in 2 races, my first race and my second race. And since my second race, I've seen her once in the grocery store where she told me she was hoping to move to Texas to be with her son. And I, um, you know, you think about January 6th and what I'll term the insurrection, and you look at the trials that have happened since. And for a lot of the people, they got caught up in a lot of the rhetoric and the heat and the election denial. And uh, I feel really bad that we don't, that, to my way of seeing it, they're living in an alternative reality. And maybe they think that I am, but we're in a place in this country where people have such vastly different views of what's happening, and it's eroding trust, it's eroding faith in government, and worst of all, it's eroding faith in each other. And our society can't hold. We've really got to start rebuilding trust. I was just looking up every day when I get up, I think, how do I keep faith with the people who elected me? It turns out that about 70%, I think 67% of people still have faith in local government, but only 32% do in Congress. But the media now too is, I didn't look up the numbers for the latest Pew poll, but we need all of us to take responsibility to be honest, to not exaggerate, to not pull things out of thin air, and to really level with each other, because that's the only way we're going to build our society back. The center can't hold if we continue on this path.
Did Karen Jones endorse you or not?
She did my second. I don't. I think she may have in first race. I think she did. Second, I can't remember. I don't remember, but not this race for sure.
Okay. All right.
I know it's not the best to, you know, mention your opponent when being asked, but we're going to do it anyway. What do you think of Frank Troyce? Because you know that he's got a lot of money, as I've reported, billionaire, multimillionaire. That's not going to be an issue for him, and he feels like he's got all the answers fiscally. And you know, if this were the previous district, right, it's a whole different story. I mean, you're clearly the favorite and going to win, but because Isla Vista is out of there, and then you got a couple other people potentially splitting votes. I mean, are you concerned about Frank Troyce being in the race, or you're not really?
Well, again, I think he offers people a choice. He has not lived He's been living in Singapore. He's not well known in the Santa Ynez Valley. He has not been someone deeply engaged in public service or even civic organizations. So he's not well known. If this were a Senate race or a national race, you could put out a lot of media stuff and maybe sway people. Here, I believe in local government. And I'm present. I'm there, and I've been delivering for my constituents. So we'll have to see. I can't answer that question. All I can do is the best I know how to do every day. I've been doing that for 7 years, for 2 years in the new district, and we'll have to see what people think about that.
Are you going to debate him and Janelle? Will you show up to those forums and debates?
Thank you for the question. We have 4 different forums scheduled. The first forum was one where I was given 8 days notice saying this is the date, and I already had a speaking engagement. And so, I'm not going to dump my date for somebody else. I feel I've got to follow through on a commitment. But we'll have 4 different forums and opportunities to interact and go head to head.
All right. Josh, can I just ask one more
Yeah,
thing?
go ahead. Go
You
ahead.
know, putting aside the specifics of his platform, whatever they are, you know, the county does have this kind of chronic finance problem. You kind of go back and forth. Do you see that more as a revenue problem or a cost problem? How just, kind of 5, 10 years out, do you need to find new sources of revenue? Or, are there places that you can make substantial cuts in the existing budget?
It's always a question of both. And I'm really, really proud of our board because we've done everything we can to make our county organization, working with our wonderful CEO, Mona Miyasato, uh, lean and nimble. We've had a renew initiative. We've had KPMG performance audits of every single department. All of this is connected to performance reviews. We've invested heavily in IT, information technology, to make our work more efficient and effective. The cannabis was one source of new revenue, but the county does need to think, how are we going to fund county efforts over time? But I think the bigger question is this: how is our county going to evolve? What's the future in terms of economic vitality? I early on started working with REACH in my old district, and they're a nonprofit. And the question was, with the closure of Diablo and all those good jobs in North County, what are we going to do? Well, this has been evolving with lots of studies and convenings and a growing MOU set of partners. But basically, where we're headed, and we just had a comprehensive economic development strategy published that is both with SLO County, Santa Barbara County, and many other partners. Where we're going is ag technology. Ag jobs are going to change radically. And we're not going to have so many people actually working in the fields. We're going to need people who can manage the machines, repair the machines. Energy technology with all the wind that I described. Aerospace technology, $600 million is going into Vandenberg Space Force Base over the next several years to upgrade that facility. On the public side, that doesn't even get into the space launch private, which are happening all the time. So the Central Coast is in these directions. We looking around the corner, this is what we've got to get ready for. We don't have a workforce that's prepared for these kinds of jobs. What kind of skills does that workforce need? They need precision manufacturing. They need AI, that word again, automated systems. because that's what is kind of undergirding all those different new jobs. And particularly in North County, we need to begin working with students to get the prerequisites that even if they don't go to college, they still need the math background. So I've been working with a group of people that includes Lompoc Unified School, the County Office of Education, the Workforce Development Board, Hancock College, REACH. How can we create a pilot program in Lompoc that could, and North County Econ Alliance is a key partner as well as Future for Lompoc Youth. Identify students, work with students, get money from to employers. There's already grants that are available to pay the students to do internships, to get them mentors, to get them in the classes, to build from within the workforce that we need, because the economy is changing. And so that's my vision and working hard at it. You can't just money doesn't just come and drop down. You need to build the foundation from the bottom up. And that is what I am committed to doing as a supervisor.
And how does that generate more money for the county?
Well, we see Goleta with all the high-tech businesses and good paying jobs. It means, for one thing, you don't have such demand on services.
Okay, thanks.
Well, that's great. Supervisor Hartman, I appreciate your time. It's such a privilege, honor to be able to talk to you.
Yeah, thank you very
Matt?
much for taking the time to speak with us.
A great conversation, and thank you so much for taking the time to be on the show. Jerry?
Well, again, this is my first time and I've really enjoyed it. It's been a lovely conversation, and invite me back. I'll be there anytime.
Thank you, Supervisor. Appreciate it.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Have a good weekend. Bye-bye.